You've rewritten the same text 4 times. Not because the first version was unclear. Because you're searching for the exact combination of words that will make someone feel okay about a decision that was never theirs to approve in the first place. You already said no. You already gave your reason. And you're still there, 20 minutes later, softening a sentence, adding context nobody asked for, trying to engineer a response that guarantees they won't be upset with you. This isn't really about the text message. It's about something you've been doing for years, in almost every relationship you have, and you've probably never named it out loud. You don't just communicate. You over-explain. You defend decisions that were already reasonable the moment you first said them. And somewhere underneath all of it is a question you haven't asked directly. What are you actually trying to get from them when the explaining doesn't stop? This isn't a video about shutting people out or refusing to communicate. It's the opposite. It's about learning where honest communication ends and something else begins. Think about the last time someone at work repeated a version of events that wasn't quite what happened. Maybe they left out context. Maybe they made you sound careless when you were being careful. And you felt this pull, not just to correct the record once, but to keep correcting it with everyone who might have heard the wrong version. You tell the story again and again, watching their face for the moment they finally get it. Here's the uncomfortable part. Some of them already get it. They understood you the first time. What they don't do is agree with you. And a part of you is treating that disagreement like it's a misunderstanding you can still fix if you just find the right words. Or picture this one. You and your partner disagree about a purchase, a night out, how you spent a Saturday. You explain your reasoning. They go quiet or short or a little cold. And instead of sitting in that discomfort, you keep talking. You bring up the decision again the next day. You mention it a third time a week later, unprompted, still trying to close a case that was never actually open. Their silence didn't mean they misunderstood you. It meant they disagreed, and you couldn't tell the difference. That's the real target underneath all of this. Not the conversation. Not even the relationship. What you're actually trying to manage is the version of you that lives in someone else's head. You want it to stay likable, reasonable, good. So you keep feeding it more information, hoping enough of the right words will finally lock in the image you're after. It won't. Because that image was never fully yours to build. You get to choose what you say and how you say it. You don't get to choose what someone else decides to make of it. Now stretch that same pattern across a longer distance. Say you decided not to go to the family holiday this year. You told your mother clearly, weeks in advance, with a real reason, you needed the time, or the last visit left you drained for days afterward. She calls anyway. Asks you to explain it again. You do. She asks a second time, a week later, in a slightly different way, like maybe this version will make more sense to her than the last one. You explain it again. By the third call, you're not clarifying anymore. You're negotiating, defending a decision you already had every right to make, hoping that if you just phrase it well enough, she'll finally release you from her disappointment. She's not confused. She heard you the first time. What's actually happening is different, and it's worth naming clearly, because it doesn't look the same as the other two situations. This isn't about proving your point to someone who's still gathering information. It's about a decision that's already made, being reopened over and over, until you're worn down enough to change it or guilty enough to wish you had. Someone who sincerely doesn't understand asks a real question and listens to the answer. You can usually feel the difference. They are quiet after you speak, turning it over, not loading the next objection. Someone who disagrees in good faith hears you, tells you they see it differently, maybe even tells you they think you're making a mistake, and then lets the conversation end there, even if the discomfort doesn't fully leave. But some people do neither. They keep asking, not because they are lost, and not because they simply disagree, but because the asking itself is the tool. "I just don't get why you do that" isn't always confusion. Sometimes it's an opening line designed to pull you back into the negotiation. Every time you re-explain, you hand them another turn at changing your mind, another chance to wear the decision down until you either give in or exhaust yourself trying not to. That's not a misunderstanding you can clear up. That's a pattern that runs on your willingness to keep responding. Now, before this turns into permission to stop talking to people, it isn't. Refusing to explain yourself can be its own trap. If your decision actually caused harm, if you broke a promise, spoke carelessly, or let someone down in a way that wasn't just disagreeable but genuinely damaging, an explanation is not what's owed. An apology is. A real one, followed by whatever repair is actually possible. Talking your way through what happened doesn't replace making it right, and no amount of careful wording should be used to avoid that. If someone is genuinely trying to understand you and asking honest questions, staying silent out of pride isn't strength either. It's just a quieter way of avoiding the conversation. The line isn't between explaining and not explaining. It's between two very different reasons for opening your mouth again. One is clarification. You said something unclear, or new information changed things, or you got something wrong and you're owning it. The other is justification, repeating a decision that was already clear to someone who already understood it and simply disagrees, or worse, to someone using the demand for more explanation to keep you negotiating something that was never actually up for a vote. The first is communication. The second is a request for permission, dressed up as a sentence. There's an old idea, credited to the philosopher Epictetus, that draws this line cleanly. He taught that some things are within our power, our own choices, our honesty, how clearly we speak our mind, and some things never are, no matter how badly we want them to be. Someone else's interpretation of you sits firmly in that second category. You can hand them the truth. You can't hand them the reaction to it. So before you send the next message, or start the next round of the same conversation, try this. Write what you actually want to say, the whole thing, unfiltered, and then don't send it. Set it down for 10 minutes. When you come back to it, read it as if someone else wrote it to you and ask one question. Is there anything in here you haven't already said? If the answer is yes, that's clarification and it's worth sending. If the answer is no, what you're holding isn't a message. It's a plea, and sending it won't get you what you actually want, which was never information. It was permission. You can also ask yourself a few sharper questions in the moment. Have I already said this clearly? Is this person genuinely trying to understand me, or have they already decided? Is there new information here, or am I just repeating myself in a different order? And the one that cuts closest, am I communicating right now, or am I quietly asking to be let off the hook? When the honest answer is that you've already said your piece, you don't need a longer message. You need a shorter one. Something closer to, "I understand you see it differently. I've told you where I stand, and that hasn't changed." Then you stop. Not coldly. Not as a punishment. You stop because you've done the honest part of your job, and the interpreting was never assigned to you. The next time you're in a hard conversation with a parent, a partner, a friend who's decided you're wrong, say your piece once clearly and completely. Then notice the urge to add one more sentence, one more piece of context, one more attempt to be understood exactly the way you want to be understood. And let that urge sit there, unanswered. Being misunderstood by someone who's made up their mind is uncomfortable. But rewriting yourself again and again to control an opinion that was never yours to control, that costs more every time you do it. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, CalmForged is built around exactly this: the quiet, unglamorous work of thinking more clearly under pressure. Subscribing just means you won't miss the next piece of it.